Hey there, you watching Bare Knuckle Binder. Welcome to the channel. Really happy to have you along. I've been getting caught up in details, but I want to show you something real quick. Let me set this down here. Perfectly matched and re-arched front leaf springs. Man, that is nice looking. Whew. God dog. Now I show you those because it brings me to a point I want to make. In my last video, I was really deep into re-arching those springs, and I got a comment. I have to say that most of the comments I get on YouTube are really nice, and I appreciate that. There's a lot of y'all that are faithful viewers, and you always have nothing but nice things to say, which I appreciate. And I understand that criticism does exist. And I also understand that YouTube is known for having negative comments. Now, I had a comment on the last video that I figured I'd take and use as an example of how to make a negative thing into a good thing. I don't really get into drama. My life has zero drama. I'm fine with that. I don't leave bad comments on other people's stuff just because there's so much better things to do with your life. I'll touch on that second point in the last part of this video. All right, so with this guy's comment, I just have to say that I don't normally respond to comments, especially negative ones, on video, but the guy was 1/8 correct. And by that, let's just break down his comment into fractions. The first half being what he said, the second half being how he said it. Now the second half, I'll talk about at the end of this video. All right, so the first half being what he said two things that are, I guess, worth discussing. The rest of it's just nonsense that I'm going to skip. But first and foremost, the only reason really I'm bringing this to anyone's attention is that he said, that's ridiculous. That's not how you re-arch leaf springs. You have to use heat. You have to re-anneal the springs, blah, 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 blah. And he is correct to the point that that is one method of re-arching leaf springs. There's two methods, a hot method and a cold method. And the cold method has been used for hundreds of years, and most of that time it was done with a hammer and an anvil. This thing is far more exact, far more controlled, just a better result overall. But I will give it to him in that hot re-arching is a thing, and it's probably way superior. But this is something that not only blacksmiths from the 1700s and on have been doing with a hammer and an anvil, but also hot rod guys, off-road guys, all these guys with Jeeps in mid-century, they've all been doing this. Not necessarily with this jig that I built, but with a hammer and an anvil. It's not that I'm trying to rub anything in anybody's face. That's not why I started a YouTube channel, and that's not the behavior I'm trying to get into. I'm just saying that you could find this information with a 2-minute Google search. If you can type out that type of a comment on YouTube, you could probably type that into Google. I'm just saying. Anyway, the second half of the first part of his comment, which makes him only 1/8 correct, is that he said that I should spend at least $100 on my jack stands. And my jack stands are rated for 6 tons apiece. The truck itself weighs 6,000 pounds. So with 2 jack stands on the truck, okay. All right, so that gives me 20,000 pounds of a margin of error. It's gonna be all right. Anyway, let's get back into the project. Let's not waste any time on this stuff anymore. All right, so I wanted to have the whole interior of the truck done, but before I can get into the boots for the shifters, I wanted to get those done, and I'll show you what's slowing me up right now. All right, I've been going through here, and this thing, I had to cut some bolts off. This has got a rusted out spot here. I'm probably gonna cut this out and patch in a spot for that and get that bolt out of there. Just a lot of little patchwork I've been doing. I might even get this cut off cross member just exposed and weld in the replacement part I have for it. Another thing I've been putting in clips here. This one doesn't match up because this cut part here is worth mentioning. That is from in the junkyard when they removed the motor. This truck had an SD240 from the factory, and I think that they pulled the motor when they set it in the junkyard. I'm guessing maybe there was brake failure or something is why they parked it. But they pulled the motor. Instead of doing it right, they cut this and peeled it back. They, hood was missing. Now with that motor being pulled, I think they removed the wheels, because when I found it was just sitting on the hubs. I believe they removed the wheel to get this truck lower to the ground because it sits so high. And it made it easier to pull the motor out that way. And from the looks of it, they pulled the radiator, and I think they just tipped. There was a cross member missing, and they think they pulled the cross member that goes into the bell housing, and they tipped the motor up and pulled it straight up out of the engine bay, and which would explain why the hood is also missing. So anyway, let's get back to what I'm talking about here. Now you might have noticed my face is really dirty, but I've been welding and grinding and everything all day and rebuilding this thing. And what I've been doing, added this, sorry, I'm out of flap wheels, and a lot of this is just rust pitting. I rebuilt this to the point that I can actually put these homemade retainers on the boots for the levers. And the reason I had to do that, rebuild all this stuff this morning, there's some welded in patches under here, and this is all a brand new patch. This whole surround is a patch. All that stuff was rusted out, and I was basically running screws into either thin air or just rust that was going to pull out. And I just decided, I've already got this out of the truck right now. I'm about to bury it under floor mats. I might as well do this. I might as well take the time and get it to where I'm happy with it. So I'm about to get the boots out, and I'll have those in there hopefully by the end of the night tonight. See what else I'm welding on over here. Oh, yeah. Keep in mind I'm waiting on an order of flap wheels, so that didn't go super swell, but I did shorten one half of the gas tank. I gotta shorten this half today. Just getting through it. I've already washed it out with lye, so there's no gas in it. It's just, kind of stinky on the inside a little bit, but not as bad as it was. Floor mat stuff there. But so the gas tank is almost ready to be etched and coated. In the meantime, if you followed the other video, that's the gas tank for the H. I have that cleaning out right now as long as I'm at it. That brings up a good point, is that if you use POR 15 tank liner, which I love, or KBS, which is very similar. I'm not totally convinced it isn't the same thing, but it is cheaper. I'm using KBS this time. I got an entire quart of it. And if you can prepare multiple tanks, right? So I have this black tank here I'm calling my road tank, because obviously I'm using it for road trips now with the Coleman. This is an under the seat tank for the M5H6, the Army truck. Obviously the H tank, and these guys right here are a bunch of old metal gas tanks that I have. They're just old metal gas cans, and they get rust in them or they get varnish, and so I'm just going to clean them all out and then etch them and coat them all, since I've got an entire quart of fuel tank liner. The thing is, you just got to take the time and do them right. Another thing I want to mention real quick is that here's my floor mat. I got it out, obviously, because I got to do all that work on the floor, but I'm washing it off and getting all the dirt off it. But I found a brown headliner. I found this in my garage attic when I was searching for other parts, so I guess I'll try to put this headliner in. That'll be cool. All right, another thing I want to show you real quick is that this is what I've been working on with the visors. I mentioned last video, should I upholster these? And someone said yes. That's all it took for me. So the problem with these is that this is not the correct covering for them, but this is what I've been using for the boots. I'm going to recover the seat with it this week. And the problem is that the stuff that they use for it is this type of fiberboard, and it just basically, after 70 years, it turns to dust. And it's the problem with that stuff is that nobody is providing it anymore for restoration purposes. I talked to George Kirkham about it in, what was it, May, late April or May, when I was up there in Canada. George Kirkham was telling me, because I asked him specifically about the material to recover these, he said it's not available and the supplier doesn't want to distribute it anymore because the properties of that stuff, when you bend it, it breaks on the bend. George's like, I know that, but we still need it to do correct restorations. But since so many people don't understand this stuff were complaining about it, it is no longer available. So I use contact adhesive, 3M77, I believe is what it is. I use on these, and then I just put like a pile of service manuals on top of it overnight to really bond it together. The problem with these, I found it interesting. This one is like this pressed fiber board material, and this one is the one I got from my buddy Joe, who sent it in so that Jess could have a sun visor on the trip. This one, when I took it apart, was actually multiple layers of like a thinner fiber board. So I glued those together and glued this thing on top. Now, to be correct, they should have a sewn border on them, and I tried to sew it on last night, and it looks like I'm gonna have to glue it first because, well, here's another answer to a question. This is my sewing machine. I have a old Singer double stitch, but I usually just run one needle on it to do more intricate stuff. I mean, this thing will run a needle through your finger. This thing will do leather, it'll do denim, it'll do whatever. So I upholster all my truck seats with it. So today, or this evening, I'm gonna clamp and glue some of this border on here, and then I can sew it up, hopefully, and get those looking nice for the trip. But they're mostly done. So, yay, visors. So where I'm sitting right now, I am looking at this thing. God, that looks good. I love the stance on the truck now. It reminds me a lot of when I was putting it together in the junkyard almost exactly 2 years ago, and it's perfect. The problem is now it's a little low in the back. So after getting the hang of arching these leaf springs, still got to do the stuff on the front diff. I got to put new shocks on there because it just lifted way up several inches. So these leaf springs, I really got the hang of re-arching these and really doing what I think is a stellar job on it. So I'm going to cut to that right now. I filmed this earlier, but we'll come back, talk about the rears. So the springs that I arched in the last video are too arched, and I haven't even tried to mount them. It's just, they're like 4 inches away from where they need to be. Even though I need the height, I can't justify that much arch, and I don't know how I'm gonna wrestle them on there. So I measured pretty much the ideal length of eye to eye on the springs, and so I arched a set to that, and it looks like it's gonna be about, I'm gonna add some leaves on this one to get the height like I talked about in the original video, but it looks like this one is gonna be about 3 inches of lift instead of the 4, and then the bring down to 3. Like I talked about, the springs will settle after a while. However, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some springs, and hopefully I can control or reduce the amount of settling and sagging in the springs. So maybe it'll come down maybe 1/2 inch. We'll find out, we'll see. And actually it'll be a pretty interesting point to video, because I can, you know, stop somewhere on the trip and measure where the bumper of the truck is sitting if it comes down or whatever. So let's take a look at them. So these are the springs that I arched in the last video. They've got the bolt in them. These are the springs that I've arched since, and it's been a really interesting thing. I've been getting better at arching these springs. Some of these are a little uneven, and I figure when you bring them together, they'll all just like kind of make this pack. However, these ones, I've really spent some time on them. That's why I've got the chalk here. I've really spent some time on them so that they really sit, you know, right next to each other. There's not too many gaps. And so what I'll do when I'm arching them, just for an example, I'll line up where the hole is here so that I know where the middle is, right there. And then I hold it over the spring. And as you can see, it's pretty, if I could hold it steady, it follows the arch of the other spring very well. And so if I find something where You know, if you lined it up and, like, let's say the spring was like this, then I'd find where it was bent here too much, and I'd mark it with the chalk, and then I'd put it in backwards and de-arch it. Or if it was like this to a point and coming out, I'd find where it needs to be bent and mark it. At this point, I'm gonna tear apart this pack and de-arch springs. A viewer on this channel alerted me a while back that he had a international Coleman conversion manual. And granted, it's for slightly older trucks and larger trucks, but the stuff still applies. I've measured the stuff on my Coleman. It lines up. And so in that manual, he mentioned it in comments in the last video. I ordered one of these manuals, but I ordered it to my parents' address in Wisconsin because I was up there working on the other Coleman. And I think I forgot to bring it with me. I haven't been able to find it. But he did mention in the last video that the Coleman manual suggests adding 3 leaves to the front. And it doesn't say which leaves. He said, I just ordered another one, so I have a Texas copy. It'll be here later this week, I hope. So what I'm going to do, since I have the winch on there, I was thinking with just a Coleman conversion, you would have probably the shorter leaves just for the lift, because a Coleman conversion really doesn't add more weight other than the transfer case to the truck that's above the springs. But the winch is above the springs. I'm thinking I'll add another second spring, and I'm thinking I'll add another 4th spring. This spring, let's see, this spring here also has it over on this end, is where the spring keepers are. And I just ground off the head of the rivet and pulled those. They're still intact here. I originally ground one off of that 3rd spring so that I could fit it into the rearcher because it's just a little too tight to get in there. This is actually a pretty good view of the dies. Just pipe cut in half and welded to square tube there. What I'm planning to do is to cut new keepers out of just bar stock and then drill a hole and just weld it on there and just fold them over once I have the spring completely set up how I want it to be. So in the meantime, I'm going to take this spring pack apart and de-arch the stuff to match the contours on here, and then I'll put a new 4th spring in, and then I'll put another one down here towards the bottom. I'm thinking probably the 2nd from the bottom is what I'll use. You know, luckily we know that these are a 1/4 inch thick, so that'll give us 3/4 of an inch right there, where it looks like we're 3/4 of an inch, a little less than 3/4 of an inch from 11 inches. And remember, we started out at almost 8. So this is definitely gonna be a heck of a lift on the front, and having these extra springs in here, I think will certainly control the amount of sag. So we were shooting for 12. It's gonna be around 11 with reduced sag. I think it'd probably be just about perfect. I just got this pack apart and you can see how scattered the springs are. And these springs are all just parallel arches. So that's a pretty good indication that we're getting better at this. Like I said, I'm gonna pull out, let's see, this guy, this guy, and that guy. These go in the spare spring pile, which apparently is right there. Look at that boy right there, needs to be de-arched. That fella right there really needs to be de-arched. Maybe we'll get lucky on this one. This one also. All right, well, here we go. All right, real quick before I get any further, I got the first spring pack done, and I put this spring pack, which is the spring pack that was on the truck that we haven't opened yet, on here for comparison. And I just want to mention real quick that we are right at 11. We're basically perfect. I'm going to pull these springs and set them up on end for a comparison, but I wanted to show you this real quick, is that I wanted a 3-inch lift, and it's just a hair above 3. And with the extra leaves in there, hopefully it won't sag a complete inch. So let me set these up on their end and show you the difference. All right, here's a side-by-side comparison. They're both butted up on the angle iron. So that one more than 2 inches, and then the profile. We should be pretty good. I'm excited to get this on the truck, but before I get this on the truck, I'm gonna take this spring pack completely apart and start tearing apart 2 other spring packs to combine, the remaining 2, this one included, and I have to match each single one of these 12 leaves with the new ones that I'm re-arching, just so that the truck suspension will be as even as possible. So here we go. Going around getting these springs put together. As far as the spring keepers are concerned, made new ones out of just 3/4 by 3/16 stock. This is actually the side that's going to be against the spring right now. I'm going to bend them, just getting some paint on the inside. I know most of it will wear off. It's just mostly OCD putting that on there. Then I'm going to bend this around. Fits right on there. I'm going to pre-bend these a little bit just to get them started. Then I put a weld that button up right there. Take the place of the rivet, and then yeah, just fold it all the way over and then run some paint on it, and these things will be ready to reinstall. So looks like I had a knife fight and bled PR15 all over this stuff, but the springs are looking good. All right, so the rears, you can see these boys are pretty flat. Yeah. So, and the other thing I noticed about the rears when I was really getting into it, I really started inspecting the truck, and the rears aren't really even. There's just, and I think a lot of that has to do with how the leaf springs were set up when I got it. I don't know that I actually made a video about it. I think I just mentioned it because I got in a yank to get out of the junkyard, just trying to get on the road. But on the passenger side, at one point, apparently one of the spring hangers broke. And so instead of getting another spring hanger, they took a bolt and they bored a hole about where the spring hanger pin was, and they ran the bolt directly through the frame and just bolted this thing to the frame. It's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. And it was really wallered out, and I'm sure that's what threw the springs off, and they're all just worn different. So I'm going to take apart the rear leaf springs. I'm gonna re-arch them all cold. Hopefully by this weekend I'll have the rear spring packs in the garage and re-arching them. They'll be in the video for next week. So anyway, it's crazy to think about. I've actually only got one video, unless I put out more than one in the next week, but I've only got one video really until I leave for California with this truck. So I gotta get it ready. I'm leaving on October 6th, which is a Sunday, and I'm driving straight to Reno first. I'll meet Jess there, and we'll cruise up to Grass Valley and Chico and all that stuff. I'd really like to get a video done before I leave. 2 videos, now that I mention it. I'd like to get a video done about the history that I know of this truck so far, and try to get the ball rolling to try to kind of get a call to action or a plea for help or something if anybody's got information about it. So, but I'll get into that, and I'll tell you everything I know about the truck and see if anybody can help me pick up the ball and run from there. All right, so what I was mentioning about at the start of the video, and I wanted to just kind of expound on a little bit, is that as far as the negative comment and people just leaving, you know, just, I like to think of it as low value interaction. I call it low value interaction because you can go on any type of social media, anywhere on the internet, and you can find people saying negative things everywhere. And it's so commonplace that it's really worth less than nothing. But I think the larger thing at play here is that it's how you choose to live your life. I feel like a lot of people use the present moment as a means to an end, and they really miss out on a lot of things. Jess and I had a dear friend of ours over for dinner earlier this week, and he reminded me of a timeless old story that really makes me think about this entire situation. A lot of you probably know this story, but the story is that there's a builder, and he's a really talented builder, and he has a wealthy friend who says, "You're such a great builder. I want you to build me a house and just spare no expense and use all your talents and just make this wonderful house." And so the guy starts building this house, and the wealthy friend is paying for everything, and the guy just starts phoning it in and cutting corners. And he's like, yeah, this guy won't know the difference, and he just goes through and he ends up building just a piece of junk house. Friend pays top dollar for this whole thing, supplies him with everything he would need possibly to build the greatest house, and the guy just kind of sloughs it off and just does whatever. So when it comes time to deliver on the house and hand the keys over, here's this house this guy has built. And his friend is like, you're such a great friend and a builder. I want you to have this house. I don't know what you believe, if you're religious or not or anything, but life or the universe or God or whatever you want to call it, your situation, you've been provided with these amazing opportunities, everything you possibly need to make something amazing. You've been given talents, you have the ability to develop skills, you have a brain to learn. There's just so much you can do and so much positive things you can pursue. Don't waste your time on low value behavior or just wasting your time, because you're not really cheating anybody. You're not really hurting anybody but yourself, because when the clock runs out, nobody has to answer for that. You're going to be the only one there. What I'm saying is, life's too short. Do awesome stuff. Take some chances. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe. That really helps me out. And maybe if you're on the West Coast, I will see you at the Fall Sierra Rally, October 11th to the 13th. And other than that, I'll see you in the next video, and have a great week.